most amazing artist. I hope you are having a great day today. Welcome to week 3, and actually it's the last week of our folk art landscapes. Today, as you may have guessed by what I have set out here, we are going to be adding color to our beautiful landscapes. So we're going to do a very quick lesson on the color wheel. The color wheel is very important to an artist because it tells us two things. It can show us how to mix colors, like if I wanted to make orange, orange is right in the middle of red and yellow, so I know that red plus yellow equals orange. And that goes for tertiary colors too. A tertiary color is a primary color like red, yellow, and blue, mixed with a secondary color like orange, purple, and green. Together, if I wanted to make red orange, let's say, I didn't want to use red and I didn't want to use orange, I wanted to use something in the middle, I could use a color called red orange, and that's a tertiary color, and it's actually in the name. All I would need to do is mix red and orange together to create that beautiful tertiary color, red orange. So we're going to be using analogous colors to paint this picture, and analogous colors are 2 or 3 colors that are right next to each other on the color wheel. Our color scheme, we're going to have one primary color, one secondary color, and together they are going to make a tertiary color. So let's say you know that for sure you want to use blue in your landscape. So you could do 2 things on this color wheel. We know analogous colors are 2 or 3 colors right next to each other. So you could go this way and do blue, that's your primary, mixed with purple, that's your secondary, and together when you mix them you will make blue purple. So in your landscape you would have the color blue, you would have the color blue purple, and you would have purple. Or maybe instead of purple you wanted to go the opposite direction on the color wheel and you wanted more green tones in your landscape. So you could use blue as your primary still, you could use green as your secondary, and together they make blue-green, which is a tertiary color. So some parts of your landscape will be just blue, some parts will be blue and green mixed together to make blue-green, and other parts will be just green. So those would be your 3 colors, your 3 analogous colors right next to each other on the color wheel. So go ahead and look at the color wheel and choose your 3 analogous colors. You need 1 primary, 1 secondary, and 1 tertiary to make up your 3 analogous colors. One of my favorite analogous color schemes is to use red as my primary color, purple as my secondary color, and when I mix those 2 together, I'll get my tertiary color, red purple or red violet. So I think I'm going to go with that analogous color scheme, and I'm just going to double check. I have a primary, I have a secondary, together they make my tertiary, and that is 1, 2, 3 colors right next to each other on the color wheel. Now for our materials today, if you're in my face-to-face classes, you're going to get something that looks like this. And this is something that actually organizes your medicine throughout the week, but we are going to use it for liquid watercolors. Inside of here I have liquid watercolors, and it's the exact same thing as this, except for when you get these watercolors, they're dry and you have to add water to them. The reason why these are called liquid watercolors and the reason why they're different is because they're already in a liquid form. You don't have to add water to them unless you want a lighter color. So let's say I want to use red, but I don't want it to be very dark, so I would add more water to it to lighten it up a little bit. But if you're at home, you definitely don't have to use liquid watercolors. If you have something like this, which is watercolors just normal, and you have to add water to them to get them to work. If you don't have that, then of course you can use crayons if you want to. You could use colored pencils. You could even use markers if you wanted to color first with your markers and then go over your markers with water. It'll actually turn it into a beautiful watercolor paint. You could do that if you wanted to. So look around your house if you're at home and gather whatever materials you would like to use today to color your landscape. But whatever material you choose to color with today, just make sure that you are looking at the color wheel and choosing 3 analogous colors. So like I said, for me, I'm going to use red and purple. So all I need to do is open up my red color and open up my purple color, and I'm ready to get started. Almost forgot to mention, I also have some water, and I have a messy mat under my work so then I don't get any mess on my table. And what I'm going to do here is simply, I'm just going to paint right in each of my hills here, and I'm going to try to do them a mixture of both of my primary color, my red, and my secondary color, purple, and in some spaces I'll mix red and purple together to make my tertiary color, red violet. So I'm going to take my paintbrush and I'm going to get it wet first with the water just to get my paintbrush all ready for paint. And I think I'll start with red, so I'm going to get some water and I'm going to grab some red paint. And I don't want this to be super dark red at first. I just want it to be kind of lighter. So I'm gonna have more water on my paintbrush and I'm gonna paint it inside of this space here. And it's okay if you go over your Sharpie, totally fine. If your watercolor starts to look very dry, then we know we need to add some more water. We don't want our painting to look thirsty. We want it to look nice and hydrated. So whenever your painting starts to look a little bit dry, just go ahead, grab a little bit more water and add some water to any dry areas. So there's one spot done. I think for my next one, I will do a violet. So I'm gonna clean my paintbrush and I'm gonna draw an X in the bottom of it to make sure I'm not splashing and not squishing my paintbrush's tippy toes, because we know our paintbrush is like a ballerina. She likes to stand on her tippy toes just like a ballerina would dance on a stage. And that just means do not squish your paintbrush, because then you will ruin the bristles on the top of it. So I'm just grabbing some violet here, and I think I'll paint this space violet. And like I said, you can go right over that Sharpie that we used. If you're at home and you drew your landscape with like a black marker or something, you might want to be careful putting water on top of it in case you use like a washable marker, because then that black marker will start to bleed into your colors. So just be mindful of that if you're doing this project at home. I noticed my little space here was very dry, so I just added a little bit more water to it. And now I can move on to my next space. And let's do a mix of red and violet now to make my red violet. I'll add red first, and I'll just go to this space, and then I can get some water, grab some violet, and I can start mixing those together on my paper. Since this is watercolor, I'm really using kind of dabbing motions. I am not pressing down very hard. In fact, my paintbrush is barely touching my paper. I just want to move these colors around, move the water around to fill up all of those spaces. Now I want my red violet to be a little bit darker, so I'm going to grab some more paint on there, and there we go. And maybe add some water. And don't worry if your spaces start to bleed into one another. That's totally fine. That's kind of the nature of watercolor, is that the colors just blend together so beautifully. So if your hills, like the different colors for your hills, start to blend together, don't worry too much about that. It might end up actually looking very beautiful if that happens. And there is a beautiful red violet color. I just painted a few more hills, and I want to tell you guys a little bit about something called craftsmanship. Craftsmanship is how nice and neat your artwork is. Well, you could have good craftsmanship, which means your artwork is nice and neat, or you could have not so good craftsmanship and your artwork would be very messy. Now, this is the last step of our project, and so far you guys have done a great job keeping it nice and neat and using your best craftsmanship, but this is the last step, so we need to make sure we don't ruin that and make this part very messy. So I am going super slow, trying to fill in all of these spaces. And one thing that could make a watercolor painting look very messy is if it's super dry. And I talked about that a little bit earlier. If your painting is looking dry, like you have streaks in it, and it's hard to move your colors around, then that means your watercolor painting is very thirsty. It needs more water. So do not be scared to add more water in some places. It should be pretty wet as you're painting. If it's dry, then your painting might end up looking a little bit messy. So just keep that in mind as you are working on your painting. All right, it looks like about half of my painting is done, the bottom half, the foreground, and a little bit of my middle ground. So now I have the rest of my middle ground and background to do. I'm also going to paint the sky, and I'm going to use my best craftsmanship while I do this. But I'm gonna go ahead and speed up the last half of my painting because I think you guys are catching on, and I will be right back to show you what it looks like. I just finished painting the rest of my landscape, making sure I tried to fill in all of the white spaces. Once you have all the white spaces filled up and your painting does not look thirsty, it has enough water on it so those colors can really blend together and look beautiful, then you are done. I hope you guys had a lot of fun during this project learning all about folk art and specifically our folk artist Maddie Lou O'Kelly, and learning about the 3 different parts of a landscape: the foreground in the front, middle ground in the middle, and the background in the back. And of course, I hope you had fun today painting your beautiful analogous colors onto your painting. I can't wait to see how your final landscapes turn out. I know they're going to be amazing because you guys are amazing. All right, I'll see you guys next time. Bye guys.